Thank you all for joining our first ever WeTalk Miami. I am your host, Ondi Timoner. This is a show that I started earlier this year at South by Southwest with the partnership of Dell in order to celebrate the women that are shaping our culture across all aspects, from technology to entrepreneurship, from arts to entertainment. And we're really excited to bring all of you together to not only look at the work of these extraordinary women that we're going to bring to you today, but also to kind of come together as women ourselves and as men who are here too, welcome, to make change happen. I want to thank Dell, our lead sponsor, our founding sponsor, who always support creators across many different disciplines and support WeTalk. Also our partners at Working Not Working, at Majority and Interloper Films. Also the Miami Beach Cinematheque, where we are, is so gracious to host us for this Art Basel wind down event. And then we have the support of Deep Eddy Vodka, the PAMM by Whispering Angel, and Pierce Media and Associates. And I finally want to thank the Miamians who helped to connect us with the great local talent we're bringing you today. Adrienne Bon-Hayes, Liza Walton, Natasha Tauber, Rhonda Mitrani, Margaret Cardillo, and Maylin Dominguez, who runs the New York Film Academy. So anyway, without further ado, let's get started. Our first panel today is Art in the Digital Age. And we're really lucky to be joined by some extraordinary women. Filmmaker and writer Alison Chernick, artist and architect Felice Grodin, and artist and philanthropist and fashion designer Eva Wittels. Artists, curators, and collectors are embracing the fusion of technology and the arts, and the digital world is expanding. It's actually going to take over, and we'll soon be cyborgs and owned by the machine very, very soon. But meanwhile, and in anticipation of that, we're experiencing a transformation of how we make our art, how we put our art out. I mean, it's undeniable how that's happening. And since we are here reimagining together how to create new ways that we interact in society and new forms of art, that'll be the topic that we explore with these women. So down at the end, Alison Chernick has been, well, first of all, was nominated for a Grammy 3 days ago for her film. Yeah, when they called me in 1998 to tell me I was nominated for a Grammy, I told them they made a mistake because I was a filmmaker, and that's a music award. But there are 2 awards. There's 2 Grammys that go to filmmakers. Yeah. One is for short music videos, and one is for long-form music videos, or films. And Alison made Itzhak, which you probably have heard of about Itzhak Perlman, which we'll show you a clip of in a bit. But just a little bit more about her. She's created a lot of contemporary films about prolific artists like Jeff Koons, Matthew Barney, and is currently directing a short about Jackson Pollock. She directs fictional narratives and commercials. She's written for every network you can think of. And her latest, Itzhak, looks really at Itzhak Perlman from what, 2015, November 2015, when he was accepting the Presidential Medal of Freedom and for that she shot over 100 hours. I want to start with a clip from your Koons film because I had never seen it, and my mouth just dropped when I heard this quote. I know you're gonna, it's just a great way to kick off this show. So let's look at this clip together.
Another margarita below the big margarita. Below here? Yep. Yeah.
I'm ending the 20th century. There's no one else out there doing what I'm doing. And the reason I have this position is because I want this position more than anyone else. Many people think that they want to be in a position to communicate and to be a leading artist, but if you would give them what they think they want, they would run from it right away. And I want it more than anyone else. I think that I'm going to be looked at as a very strong artist, and I would say within the 20th century, the only parallels will be Picasso and Duchamp.
Koons likes to fill things, blow them up, and then make his own breath last forever.
$2 million. 2,100,000.
I feel compelled to ask you a question about that right now. Were you filming that when he said that to you?
In 1992, no, I was like 15 or something.
Oh, okay.
No, we bought that footage.
Okay.
Yeah, I did that film in 2004.
Did
so.
you decide to make that film, or were you commissioned to make that film? And how quickly did you realize you were dealing with someone who was that ballsy, as to say that? I mean, that's
sort
a
of
wild
what makes
statement.
Jeff Koons. I had met someone at a party that was running a high-definition art channel in New York, living in Chelsea, and a lot of my friends were artists, and met someone that had an art channel in New York, and he was doing films on like the hat maker next door and like some local artists that were more like crafts people, and I was like, well, why don't, it's an art channel, why don't you do it on like Cindy Sherman or Jeff Koons or whatever. So I pitched him about 10 people, and he gave me like 10 grand or whatever, and I did an interview of Koons that turned into a feature film. So that was the backstory there. But he was great to work with. I'm endlessly fascinated by him, and only more so by the end of the film.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into your work with artists after that.
Yeah.
So Felice is an artist and an architect from Italy, and currently lives and works in Miami Beach. And she holds a Master's of Architecture with distinction from Harvard University. And where you obtained your bachelor's degree at Tulane, your thesis was actually the recipient of the Thomas Lupo Award for Metropolitan Studies, which kind of launched you into art and architecture in combination. This is speaking for you, but speculative integration of art by modeling our present conditions and creating meaningful imprints upon them. And for that mission, augmented reality, which some of you may have heard of, is the form that your latest work, Invasive Species, which is up now, currently in Miami, right? Invasive Species is at the Peretz Art Museum in Miami, PAMM, and here it's about mediating future ecosystems through the lens of augmented reality. And you're also a member of, and I'm interested in all these things, the Alliance of Southern Triangle, which sounds incredible, AST, and also SF MoMA's online platform, Open Space, for their, it's a great name, another great name, their project Urgency Broadcasts, of which there are so many things to be urgent about right now. And then you also publish regularly in the Miami Rail. So we're so honored to have you on the show. Welcome on to WeTalk.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us, this is Terrafish, right? This is your latest, one of your works that's on display now. This
Actually,
is the sketch for it?
That's correct. So augmented reality, anybody use augmented reality here? I'm just curious. Nobody. Okay, that's really interesting. So that tells me something, which is, it kind of confirms what I've experienced, which is, a lot of people don't even really know what it is. They kind of mix it with virtual reality. It's actually different. But essentially you use your smartphone. I mean, that's the interface that you use. So what we did at the PAMM was we went through a whole process. So there was old work I was using, which is the first drawing you showed. I used to actually hold a pen to paper. And going from that to this, or to sort of all the processes involved with getting to the smartphone, has been like a year-long process. So it's been an interesting experience. So that's sort of one part of it, which is the sort of technical part of it. But then the other part of it is kind of what makes it art, because it's like any medium. It's not necessarily art, I think, unless an artist actually makes it art. So it's been kind of those two parallel.
Well, I think what's also interesting is that using augmented reality allows us to experience it, whether we enter the museum or not, whether, anybody can come by and scan that, what's it called?
Correct.
QRC
It's a
code?
QR code.
QR code.
Yeah.
QR code, and then can experience the idea that which is not visible to the human eye exists.
Right.
Which is just in and of itself something that we all play with, whether we're meditating or attempting to look just a little bit deeper into our lives. So it's really interesting. So we have actually a clip we can show you so that you can experience augmented reality. Here it is.
So this is actually Terrafish. So, you know, the first sort of drawing you saw was a drawing that's about, I don't know, 2 by 3 feet. And then it ends up being a kind of 4-dimensional experience. 4-dimensional meaning time, where you can actually walk through the piece through your phone. And the funniest thing is a lot of people, when they see the QR code, they actually just stand on it thinking something's going to happen. So just sort of educating the public a little bit about this technology, and kind of piggybacking on what Ondi was saying about it being open source art, that essentially you don't need to even go inside the museum to see this work and experience the work. And that was very important to us. Yeah.
It makes it much more accessible, which is something that art in the digital age actually does, you know. And that idea of something being reproducible and infinitely reproducible, you know, is that helpful? Does that hurt? I mean, these are some of the questions we want to explore, as it is so difficult unless you have loads of money to be an artist these days, which is what our next panel is about, art and philanthropy. Without further ado, Eva Wittels. Eva Danielle Wittels is an artist, an art director, and CEO of Eva Danielle Incorporated, a high-end women's fashion line, which has allowed her to actually fund something very dear to her heart. Eva and I met in the American Airlines lounge at LAX. And I don't know, we just somehow bonded about Miami.
We were complaining about the airport.
We were complaining. We were complaining and also kind of enjoying talking about animals. And I learned about Eva's work, High Fashion Tales. I thought it was so extraordinary. I went on her Instagram and I started to see her taking animals that are homeless and otherwise stray or abandoned and putting them into high fashion, high art scenarios, which I thought was such a unique and incredible, yeah. I mean, it's like La Chapelle. It's like a La Chapelle starring all of these cats. And, you know, using sort of your experience and all of your connections with your fashion design and all of the work that you've done to market your line, you call all these people together and people who love animals to make these. I mean, this costs a lot of money, no? And then these dogs would otherwise be like in a cage and abandoned, and they're probably adopted right away?
Most of them, we used a lot of rescues because shelters euthanize pretty quickly, and I wanted to make sure the animals had a chance. So a lot of the animals came from the rescues, and they spent the day with us. And it actually really socialized them, so it helped them get adopted even quicker. Because some of them were, you know, they were thrown into a situation and they're scared, they've just been abandoned or whatever their case is, and they're learning to trust humans again. So that was a big plus for us.
And you're working with a number of rescues on this, but it's also inspired by the work of your mother, is that right?
Yeah, so I work with about 30 to 40 rescues within the US. But my mom's work, which she started her rescue in '98, and of course I've always been kind of on the sidelines helping her, you know, trapping, spaying, neutering, grabbing dogs from expressways. So, but she inspired me to do this work.
So how much of your time does this work take? I mean, you have to run a fashion line to fund this work, no?
Well, I put my fashion line on a hiatus so that I could do this full time.
Oh, okay. So this is a full-time pursuit.
Yes.
And how is Instagram, or obviously Photoshop, right?
Yeah.
How are you using digital technology to both make the work and also get it out?
Well, a lot of it is digital retouching. I get artists from all over because they're excited about the project. I mean, half of my digital retouchers I haven't even met. They're in Russia, they're in Poland. They just love the idea of helping animals, so they just donate their time, which is really cool because they're people that I would never be able to reach out to because it's so far away. But
it's literally like my dog.
Well, this actually was not photoshopped. This is fake snow, and I have half of it still in my car. So, but the bond and the connection, that's just so real. You can't even Photoshop that. Because he actually, I mean, I had a behind the scenes that I sent you, but this looks like the actual image that we took.
We have some behind the scenes, don't we? Load it in?
Earlier, not of this one.
Okay. Yeah, but it was just very, some of them are very easy, but with Instagram it was really helpful because there are people we wouldn't be able to connect with, and and when, for instance, one of the celebrities retweets it, it gets 41,000, 50,000 likes, and that's
And it's probably doing more for the individual than just for the individual animal. I mean,
Yeah.
it's doing it for animals everywhere, and for
right.
the idea of how many strays and homeless animals. How many are there? Do we know?
I think throughout the U.S. the numbers change every year, but usually about 7 million are brought into the shelter every year, and half are euthanized. So, I mean, those numbers are pretty alarming. I mean, that's why we're trying to use positive visuals to help the message, because otherwise it's really sad and it's really realistic. So.
That's really important. Yeah, that's important to think about. So let's open it up to everybody. So Felice, another question for you is, how do you think that this age and technology is transforming our art, and like you are held back a little, or like you're challenged as an architect to kind of ride that line between making space and accepting and like working with the space that's already there. Can you tell us about that and how technology is affecting that as well?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that people ask me is, what is the difference then between what's real and what's not real? I get asked this a lot, because I guess when you think about augmented reality, it's like this idea of overlaying onto reality. But the more I think about it, the more I wonder if that question really isn't the right question. I mean, it's more about reality is what you make it, right? So this idea that you can utilize these tools to augment reality, it's not so much necessarily, in my opinion, as an escape from, but really a way in which to bend reality in a certain direction, right? So I think there's a lot of potential, actually, political traction with technology. You hear a lot of it in regard to, say, Silicon Valley and these kinds of financial instruments or instrumentation. I actually think technology can work the other way. I mean, that's what I'm more interested in, that we can use it in a way to change things for the better. So in terms of architecture, you know, we make the world, you know, if that's really what you want. And in the age of, I guess, the Anthropocene, which we're in now, which is this age in geology where everything's affected by Homo sapiens, us, we need to be responsible, no? So I'm hoping that technology is a way to go that direction and not the other direction.
So instead of being overtaken by the environment, to mold and kind of create the environment.
I mean, again, you know, it's funny. Who's overtaken it? Have we overtaken the environment, or is the environment overtaken us? And so, to me, there's no clear-cut distinction, actually, in this day and age. I mean, the thing about invasive species was it was a kind of way to look through the looking glass, I guess, and see what South Florida would look like in 500 years. So here's the question: is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? And we don't really know what that's going to be, but it was the hopes that the viewers and the experiencers would at least start to think about it, rather than not question what the future is at all, right? So I think we need to realize we can question it, but also what can we do about it?
I think when I was starting to study the internet after I made the movie We Live in Public, and I was realizing that the internet's inevitable and there's no point in fighting it, but it's kind of like the most powerful invention of our lifetime, and we can either, you know, any powerful tool can be used for great good or great evil. And in this case, it's both, right? So the question of like, where are we going to be in 5,000 years? What's Miami going to look like? Is Miami even going to exist? You know, whatever the answer is sort of an inevitability, but it's almost like also what do we do with it? And I feel like looking at Florida and the way Florida has been in the national election, it seems quite a purple state overall. You guys are very conflicted down here about everything, so I think it could go either way. But it's really important that there's artists like you down here asking these questions and like holding up a mirror. What is speculative integration? What does that even mean?
I mean,
is that what we're talking about?
It's interesting because you mentioned AST, you know, the Alliance of the Southern Triangle. It's basically a group of 4 of us, or 4 women in the group. One's a curator, there's 2 architect artists and an artist. And we wanted something to sound very bureaucratic. So we were like, we're the Alliance of the Southern Triangle. But essentially, this idea of speculation is something. It's like a double entendre, because in South Florida, there's a lot of speculation. It's built on speculation, and in some ways, it's going to sink on speculation, I think, or it's just cyclical. So again, is that good or bad? I'm not really sure, but speculation can also be something that you use to dream about. It's a way. In my opinion, it's something you can use to empower an artist or somebody who's thinking about how can we speculate on the future? What might that look like? And then most importantly, how do we communicate that? How do we communicate to people through urgent broadcasting what it could be? So I think that's interesting and powerful.
What is our role in terms of making it what it could be?
Yes.
Is that what the urgent broadcasts
Exactly.
are?
Exactly.
Are they calls to action? Like, give us an example of an urgent broadcast.
Well, the thing we did for SF MoMA, we did like 4 quick videos. They're kind of GIF-like videos. And, we kind of were trying to come up with a language, kind of an official government, type of language that people kind of understand, like emergency broadcasting and things like that, and kind of occupy that kind of language as a kind of medium that people understand, right? As an artistic medium. But then to say, okay, well, wait a minute, this might be this way, or this might be that way, depending on how you kind of take it. I mean, it can be a little scary also, but the idea is to kind of, wake everybody up and say, well, it could be this, it could be that. What do you think? What's your urgency broadcast? So, yeah.
We have one more clip from Alison of her phenomenal film, Itzhak. How many people have seen Itzhak? No one. Okay, well, that's crazy because it's a super popular. Alison, how well is it done? It's done incredibly well, no?
It has done
But
well.
I grew up in Miami, and I can tell you, like, things don't even get down here. Although the Jewish community is huge down here, so I'm surprised.
Yeah,
but
it did well in the festival circuit and the Jewish festival circuit, and amongst people sort of over 60 and musicians. Those were sort of our 3 audiences.
okay, which you probably reached a lot through the internet. I mean, you had a great distributor.
Yeah, we sort
Greenwich
of
Entertainment.
like targeted marketing. We kind of honed in on those 3. I think with documentaries, you want to figure out what your theme is and go after that. I mean, docs in general are sort of a low-tech industry, it seems.
Well, I think documentary is becoming higher and higher tech because we have a lot
Streaming.
I mean, on the distribution level, I'm a doc filmmaker, by the way, also talk show host on the side. But no, I mean, I think, one doc filmmaker to another, like, I feel like we can reach our niche audiences now. I mean, we could never even as humans connect in with our urgent broadcasts or connect with our animal lovers or connect with our Jewish community or, our disabled community in the case of Itzhak as well, I imagine.
Yeah.
The internet has allowed us to do that. It's allowed us to target, and also create fake news and also really negative things like we were talking about. But so I think on the distribution level, it's really helpful for documentaries, but also in the making of documentaries, there's so much now in terms of like, not really reenactments, but kind of the fusion between narrative or scripted and what is real. There's just a lot of that going on, a lot of more graphics and animation and like high end in this golden age of documentary. But that said, Itzhak
It's very old school.
He's super analog, man.
It's cinema verite. That's what I'm interested in stylistically.
Okay, so tell us what cinema verite is and who your heroes are,
It's
Ms.
sort of
Chernick.
like without talking heads, so you're allowing the viewer to kind of gauge their own perspective on the material and the subject instead of sort of imposing a view onto them. And then my view will sort of come through just sort of how you frame the picture and sort of what's interesting to my eye. But again, it's sort of lo-fi in the sense that you're kind of presenting it without giving too much opinion. I try to stay away from talking heads when I can. I feel like in the case of Itzhak, it would have been a lot of people like saying he's the greatest violinist in the world, and we know that, or we could go to YouTube and watch a concert footage. So I tried to kind of get behind the scenes and show who this person is and how I can kind of reveal, his inner self to the world. Whereas the short film I'm doing right now on Jackson Pollock, I don't have that option because he's not with us, so I can't film him. So that's a bunch of talking heads. But we'll show you this.
Yeah,
clip.
let's look at the clip.
Now, there was one interview in there, except it was an archive interview of his first teacher who had passed away, and she tells the story of falling in love with him. So we sort of made the exception, but yeah, it was mostly cinema fairy tale.
Alison asked me to host a screening at the Soho House in LA of this film, and I watched it for the first time right before doing the Q&A with you, and I was just, what really got me about it was just, we're at a time where, you know, hate and ignorance seem to be an enemy that's really prevalent right now in our society, and this film just touches your soul, you know, it's just, you know, and you've said about Itzhak that he personifies resilience, vision, and the contribution of the Jewish people, but also you're witnessing humor and talent and discipline and drive. Tell me about what you're going for with this film in terms of like, what, you know, as doc filmmakers, so much emerges in the editing process,
Yeah.
but like, what are the lessons that you hope people leave with? Not only about the disabled, but just overall.
Right. My goal, I think, with any subject, as I mentioned, I did one on Jeff Koons and Matthew Barney and Roy Lichtenstein and a bunch of artists, but for me, it's sort of just revealing who this person is. And until you're kind of deep into the material, I don't really go in with an agenda or a goal. I kind of allow that to be revealed during the process. And in this case, we have a very joyful character. I always say, like, if he wasn't winning Grammys, he'd be winning an Oscar. The camera loves him. And it actually, in hindsight, should have been called The Joy of Itzhak, because he is so joyful. So, yeah, when I embarked on this and met him and his wife and saw what a central figure she is to his role, you know, there's a strong woman behind every man, or I say in front of every man. Toby and Itzhak, it became this love story, and you know, he lives his life with so many morals and values that it was really almost like a role model, and he's a teacher, and it was really just, you know, finding a way to translate that onto the screen. Again, like taking any sort of agenda out of the process and just trying to just capture this, you know, inspiring, soulful man. And apparently we did it because he felt like it was a very honest portrait.
I mean, for all three of you artists up here, how important is it to just get on a level with people? I mean, as a doc filmmaker, you have to be in Itzhak's kitchen with his wife, making soup, joining him, and
I'm trying to sort of stay out of the way, but like be in the way. Like writing that line is one of the trickiest things.
Doesn't like Alan Alda come over or something like?
Alan Alda comes over, they have some wine together. And I also just tried to be organic in that process. Like I tried to not contrive too many things, and Alan Alda does come over. So I was like, well, let's film it. And yeah, and it ended up being a beautiful scene and talking about, you know, they're challenging each other sort of on their individual skills and what their techniques are in terms of acting and, you know, playing the violin and sort of how they compare and contrast. You know, and then you're kind of editing as you're doing it and figuring out what it needs, and you don't want to hit the same emotional note twice. So you could have two amazing scenes, but if they sort of feel similar in tone, then you kind of have to eliminate one. It's this whole rhythmic process.
Felice?
Yeah, I mean, for what I do and how I deal with people, I think, I mean, I was just thinking about it, reflecting on how, because it's it's almost the opposite of what she's doing.
Different.
So I was just thinking, how am I going to answer the question? I mean, I always see people as like, how would anybody experience this? Because in a certain way, I can't control that, right? So it's almost like I think about how I could set up parameters, you know, environments. That's the thing that I guess, for me, this project in particular, granted me the opportunity to do, is let you all, you know, be the ones that control that experience. So, so I don't really know, you know, how that is until I actually speak to people who've experienced it. Like, what do you think? How did you feel? You know, what did you say to somebody next to you? So, I think for me, since the medium that I'm using is so new, those kinds of conversations are not sort of set in stone yet. So, it's a process that I'm going through. So.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I was thinking when I was looking at the clip that it'd be really interesting to see who filmed that and see their reaction to the work, you know?
Yeah.
That there's a way in which I think that loop should be closed.
Yeah, I mean, the PAMM has filmed people actually, like, you know, experiencing, and I have too. I've kind of like given tours, and I've like spied as people are experiencing it, and I'm like, what do you think? And I think there's like kind of a, whereas in documentary filmmaking, I mean, it's such an established medium, and there's still that kind of veil between you and the screen. People are still kind of like a little almost like jolted when they're experiencing something through an interface in the real world. So I think it's kind of an awkward experience still, you know. We're not there yet when it's completely seamless, you know, where you don't know that you've got this device on you yet. So, and there's a lot of judgment in that. I mean, I've had a lot of people say, you know, this isn't art. So I think, you know, it's a process that we're at with that medium.
And who is the species an invasive species?
And that's the question. And not just who's the species, who's invasive, what's invasive. And I think that for me, again, this idea of speculation, I'm interested in speculating how things may mutate. Speaking of film, I mean, I recently finally saw the film Annihilation. And have any of you seen Annihilation, the film? It's a really good film. And I think that, you know, that film actually kind of talks about that in a way, that it's a very personal film. Each character is kind of going through this debilitating process in their life, and then, you know, so they're going through change. And then they're in this physical, ecological environment that's also kind of changing their DNA, and the environment's kind of mutating. And you know, it's funny because the curator I've been working with, Jennifer Inacio, and I've had so many conversations about this, that the fine line between Homo sapiens and non-Homo sapiens, I mean, who knows 500 years from now, honestly. So that's some major speculation. But I think that our consciousness is still here now, and we still want to better this place in whatever format it may become. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Big ideas.
And Eva?
Well,
You have to make animals comfortable
Yeah,
that are probably pretty skittish.
pretty tough. Sometimes it's easier than others, but getting them comfortable with so many people on set when they've all been through so much trauma that we can't even remotely understand. I remember there was one shoot where the photographer turned around too quick and the dog bit his ankle. But because everybody's on set and loves animals, they kind of just, you know, brush it off, brush it to the side, but he was bleeding. And I was like, oh God. Like it makes it a little bit tough when they're scared and you're trying to get them to look peaceful, but you just work with them and then you just calm them down, and then I mean, some shoots are 1,000 photos and we use one. So it's like shooting children, you know, you gotta make them comfortable, you gotta make them happy.
How many shoots are you doing, like a month or?
It depends, because it's always on usually the models or celebrity schedules, so some months it's 6 to 8, sometimes it's 2, it's all on, sometimes I did 3 a day. I had it spaced out. Also the photographers, the makeup artists, the hairstylists, the rescues, like we have at a minimum 8 to 10 people on set. So I've got to coordinate all those people at the same time. So I try to make them sporadic so it's not too much.
So my last question for you all is sort of what I touched on earlier is, you know, it's a challenge for artists and curators now moving into this era where I can walk in and just take a photo of your piece of work and then just put it on my Instagram if I want. In your case, that would be, you'd love that. Ideal, absolutely ideal for Eva, because she wants to get the word out. You probably also would love that, although if I try to take a picture of your work, it will just look like a building, unless I take a picture of my phone right?
You can do it. It's actually built in. You can do it.
You can take screenshots while you're looking at it.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about it?
For us, I guess it's promotion, right?
Because everybody's into it. The more the merrier.
Well, with a film, it's like you don't get much from a still, right?
Right.
You want to see a video clip?
I just remember when one of my films was pirated, I just wanted them to have the right version. It was like the pre-Sundance version or something. I was like, can I just slide the latest and greatest in to BitTorrent?
That happened to us with a trailer.
Yeah, but there is this way in which, you know, it's become an industry-wide problem because there is so much piracy that there is no revenue in these industries, and the art world are suffering anyway from all of that. But that's what our next panel is about. I'll open it up to the audience for 1 or 2 questions in case there are any, and if not, no worries. But does anybody have any questions for any of our panelists? We've covered everything? Nope, we got one.
Itzhak finished a 6-month run in theaters, and now it's on iTunes and Amazon. And it was on PBS a couple weeks ago, and it'll have another premiere on PBS, but iTunes and Amazon.
But if it wins a Grammy, as these things go, just like with the Oscars, we might see it in theaters again, I bet.
Guess so. I guess we have if you do the math right, we have a 20% chance.
When are the Grammys?
February 10th in LA. We're up against Quincy, Whitney, Eric Clapton, and Elvis.
I got to call some people and congratulate them. I didn't even know.
Yeah.
I've only texted
Only
people.
congratulate us.
Okay. All right. I want to say thank you, Alison and Felice and Eva, for joining us for Art in the Digital Age, and thank all of you for this. You're all an inspiration, and I love that we made it through a panel about women artists without really talking about what it's like to be a woman artist. I think that's maybe a first for WeTalk, but that's awesome, I think. But we'll touch on that in the next panel. We're just going to take a 10-minute break, and we'll see you for art and philanthropy.